I'm not sure what's worse, being caught or realizing I didn't want it to stop. I was staying at my best friend Noah's place for a few days over winter break. His parents were out of town, and since both of us were stuck in the city with barely enough money for heat, it made sense to shack up together. We'd done this a dozen times before, just two broke 20-somethings eating frozen pizza, playing video games, and watching old horror movies like we were still teenagers. The only difference this time was that his older brother Caleb had moved back in temporarily after some kind of breakup. I didn't know the full story. Noah only said something vague like, he and Maddie didn't work out, and left it at that. I didn't ask questions. Caleb had always been the quieter one anyway, kind of a mystery wrapped in flannel and work boots. We'd never been close. He was a few years older, always more reserved, always more serious, but not unfriendly. When I used to come over in high school, he'd nod at me, sometimes ask how school was going, then go right back to whatever he was doing. It was just how he was. But something had changed. Maybe it was the fact that we were both adults now. Maybe it was because we were under the same roof again. Or maybe it was just me, noticing things I hadn't let myself notice before. Like how good he looked when he came in from work, cheeks flushed from the cold, jaw dusted with stubble, always rolling his sleeves up like it meant nothing. Or the way he'd glance at me during dinner, just briefly, but enough for me to notice. Or how, one night, I caught him looking at me while I was laughing at something Noah said. Just looking, quiet, unreadable. It messed with my head. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was projecting, that he wasn't actually looking at me like that. He was Noah's older brother. That alone should have been enough to shut down the thoughts creeping into my brain. But then came the night it happened. It was late. Noah had crashed early after drinking too much spiked cider. I couldn't sleep. My body was buzzing, restless in that way that made lying in bed impossible. I got up, padded down the hall in just a t-shirt and briefs, figuring I'd grab some water and maybe watch something stupid on TV to tire myself out. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the fridge when I opened it. I leaned down to grab a bottle of water, my shirt riding up slightly as I did. I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until I stood up and turned around, and nearly jumped out of my skin. Caleb was standing in the doorway, barefoot, wearing nothing but a pair of low-slung sweatpants and a worn-out hoodie that was unzipped halfway. His hair was messy, like he'd just gotten out of bed. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, voice rough with sleep. I laughed, heart pounding. "It's fine, I just didn't hear you." We stood there, both of us illuminated by the pale fridge light. The silence stretched. "You couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Nope. Too wired, I guess." He nodded slowly, stepping into the room. He was close now. Closer than he needed to be. He reached past me, his arm brushing mine as he grabbed something from the fridge. An apple, of all things. And then he didn't move away. I could feel the heat coming off him, smell the faint hint of soap and whatever clean, earthy cologne he always wore. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do, what to say, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the strange spell hanging between us. "You always walk around like this?" he asked, his voice lower now. I glanced down at myself, suddenly aware of how little I was wearing. My thighs, my bare legs, the hem of my shirt resting just above the top of my briefs. "I didn't think anyone would be awake," I said, trying to sound casual, failing miserably. He looked at me, eyes lingering a second too long. "Guess I'm lucky then." My stomach flipped. That's when I realized something. He wasn't backing away. He wasn't laughing it off, making a joke, or turning around to go back to bed. He was still right there, still looking at me like he was deciding something. And then he did. Caleb leaned in, his mouth just inches from mine, and said in a quiet, deliberate voice, "If you don't want this, tell me now." I didn't say a word. I could have said something. I could have pulled away. I could have laughed it off like it was just some awkward misunderstanding. But I didn't. Because even though every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a bad idea, that this was Noah's brother, that this could blow up everything, I didn't want to stop it. I didn't want him to stop. Caleb waited. His eyes searched mine for something. Maybe hesitation. maybe regret. But when I didn't move, didn't even blink, he took it as a green light and kissed me. Not softly, not hesitantly. It was firm, almost restrained, like he'd been holding himself back for too long and didn't trust what would happen if he let go completely. His hand came up to my waist, resting just above the waistband of my briefs. His fingers didn't move, but the weight of them burned through the thin cotton. I kissed him back. God help me, I kissed him back, and the second our mouths locked, it was like something inside me snapped. Every little look, every brush of skin, every quiet moment we'd shared the past few days made sudden, undeniable sense. This wasn't new for him. He'd thought about it, just like I had. His other hand slid up my side, over the fabric of my shirt, pulling me closer. Our hips bumped. The fridge door slowly eased, shut behind us, plunging the kitchen into shadows, save for the dim light above the stove. I felt it then. His breathing, heavy against my lips, the slight tremble in his hands, the heat radiating off his body. For all his confidence, there was tension in him too. Like he wasn't sure how far to go, like he was still testing the edge of this thing. We broke the kiss, just for a second. His forehead rested against mine. "Tell me if I need to stop," he whispered. "I'll tell you," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. He kissed me again, slower this time, less like he was trying to prove something, and more like he was learning me. His hand skimmed beneath my shirt, fingers grazing my hip. My breath hitched. "I've thought about this," he said quietly, his lips brushing my jaw. I blinked. "You have?" He nodded, still close, still not letting go. More than I should. That sent a chill through me. Because yeah, I'd thought about it too, way too many times. But I never imagined he had. Not Caleb. Not quiet, serious, big brother Caleb. The kitchen felt warmer now, the kind of warmth that comes not from heaters or blankets, but from skin and proximity. I leaned back against the counter, trying to steady myself. "We can't not hear," I said, though I wasn't even sure what I was asking him to stop. Caleb smirked, but it wasn't cocky. It was knowing. "Come with me." He took my hand, and I let him. We didn't go far, just down the hallway to the guest room he'd been staying in. He pushed the door open, pulled me in behind him, and shut it quietly. The room was dark, save for the faint light from the window, but I could still see the outline of him. Broad shoulders, low-hanging sweatpants, that quiet look on his face that made my heart race. He didn't rush. He just stood there for a moment, watching me. Like he wanted to make sure I was still there with him, still choosing this. And I was. So I stepped closer, and for the first time, I kissed him first. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't testing the waters. It was me saying yes. Yes to this moment. Yes to him. Yes to the part of me I'd been pretending didn't exist for too long. My fingers slid up his chest, under the loose edge of his hoodie. His skin was warm, smooth under my touch, and I could feel his heartbeat. It was fast, just like mine. Caleb's hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer until we were chest to chest, breath to breath. It felt like everything else, every worry, every line we were about to cross, faded into the dark corners of that room. When his hoodie dropped to the floor, I didn't look away. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like I was something he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch, but wanted to anyway. His hand came up and cupped the side of my face, thumb brushing over my cheekbone. His touch was gentler than I expected, like he wasn't just acting on impulse, but something deeper, like he cared. "You're shaking," he whispered. I was. I hadn't even realized it. "I'm fine," I said. "Just nervous." Caleb nodded, his forehead resting against mine again. "Me too." That surprised me. This was Caleb. He'd always seemed so in control, so solid. But hearing him admit he was nervous, that cracked something open in me. "You're not the only one who's thought about this," I said. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "No?" I shook my head. I used to watch you back when I came over to hang out with Noah. You'd come home from work or just walk past the living room, and I'd try not to stare. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You stared. Shut up. He laughed softly, and something about that moment, the lightness of it, the way his shoulders relaxed, made the tension in the room soften just for a second. Then he leaned in again, this time kissing me slower, deeper. His fingers slid under the hem of my shirt, lifting it inch by inch until I raised my arms and let him pull it off entirely. My skin prickled in the cool air, but Caleb was right there, hands settling on my sides, thumbs brushing the ridges of my ribs like he was memorizing them. He looked at me, really looked, and it wasn't the kind of look that made me self-conscious. It was the kind that made me feel wanted. And then he said something I didn't expect. If this goes too far, it might be hard to go back. I swallowed, my heart pounding. Do you want to go back? His silence was answer enough. I moved first this time, hands on his chest, trailing down slowly, feeling the warmth of his skin, the way his muscles tensed under my touch. He let me explore him, let me set the pace. When I reached the waistband of his sweatpants, my fingers paused. You sure? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. He kissed me again, and this time when we fell into bed, it wasn't clumsy or rushed. It was careful, intense, full of heat and need and everything we hadn't said out loud. His body pressed against mine, warm and solid, and every movement felt like a revelation. At some point, the room disappeared. The walls, the sheets, even the faint sounds of traffic outside. It all blurred into background noise. All I could focus on was him, his breath, his skin. The way he moved with me, like this wasn't just a minute weakness, like it meant something. And maybe it did, because when it was over, when we lay tangled together, chest to chest and breath to breath, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Instead, Caleb just whispered, You okay? I nodded, my cheek pressed to his shoulder. Yeah. He kissed the top of my head and held me tighter. That's when I realized I wasn't just okay. I felt safe, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When I woke up, I was alone. The sheets were still warm, the indentation of his body still etched into the mattress beside me, but Caleb was gone. For a second, I wondered if I'd dreamt the whole thing. If maybe I'd finally snapped from sexual frustration and conjured up the most realistic fantasy my brain could manage. But then I saw my shirt on the floor, my briefs crumpled near the nightstand, the faint scent of his cologne still lingering on the pillow. Nope. It happened. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my hair, every muscle in my body both relaxed and sore in a way that made it very clear last night was real. A dull panic flickered in my chest, not regret exactly, but a familiar voice whispering, You screwed this up. Because I wasn't just some guy Caleb hooked up with at a bar. I was his little brother's best friend, and whatever happened between us, whatever this was, it wasn't something we could sweep under the rug. I pulled on my clothes, trying to ignore the knot of nerves building in my stomach. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe he just got up early. Maybe he was already in the kitchen. Maybe we laugh about it, or talk, or, I don't know, something. I padded down the hall quietly, the house still silent. Noah was probably still asleep. Good. The last thing I needed was for him to walk into the kitchen while I was trying to make sense of what the hell just happened between me and his brother. But when I turned the corner, it wasn't the kitchen I saw first. It was Caleb, outside, on the back porch, hoodie on, coffee mug in hand, staring out at the backyard like he was contemplating the secrets of the universe. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to turn around, pretend I hadn't seen him, buy myself some time to think, but before I could move, he turned and spotted me through the glass. Our eyes met. He didn't look shocked or awkward, just calm, like he'd been expecting me. He pushed the door open slightly and nodded toward the outside. Coffee? I blinked. Sure. I joined him on the porch, pulling my hoodie tighter against the cold. He handed me a mug and leaned back against the railing, both hands wrapped around his own. Neither of us spoke for a moment. It wasn't exactly awkward, but it was fragile. Like anything either of us said could tip this in a direction we couldn't walk back from. "You okay?" he asked eventually. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, just processing." He nodded too. "Same." I glanced at him. "So, last night." He smiled faintly, still not looking at me. "Wasn't a mistake, if that's what you're asking." My stomach eased a little. "I wasn't sure how you'd feel." "I wasn't sure either," he said honestly. "But I'm not freaking out. If anything," he finally turned to look at me, "I'm kind of relieved." That surprised me. "Relieved?" "That I wasn't the only one feeling something," he said. "That I wasn't crazy." "You're not," I said quickly. "I've thought about it too. A lot." We sipped our coffee in silence for a minute, and then I asked the question I'd been dreading. "What do we do now?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his mug down and turned to face me fully. His expression was serious but not cold. Thoughtful. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." I nodded. "Me neither." He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine on the railing. Just a small touch, subtle, but it sent a jolt through me anyway. "Let's just take it slow," he said. "Figure it out. Together." I looked up at him, heart pounding for a totally different reason now. "Okay," I said. "Yeah, together." And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he leaned down and kissed me. Softly, like a promise. Behind us, the sliding door creaked. We froze. Noah's voice cut through the cold morning air, groggy and confused. "Dude, what the hell?" Caleb pulled back so fast it was like he'd been burned. His hand dropped from mine. His posture stiffened. I turned just in time to see Noah, hair a mess, hoodie half zipped, standing barefoot in the doorway, blinking like he wasn't sure if he was still dreaming. His eyes moved from Caleb to me, then back again. Nobody said anything. For a long, awkward second, it was just 3 people frozen on a porch. 2 half in love, 1 completely in shock. I started, but the words died in my throat. What the hell could I even say? That it wasn't what it looked like? Because it was. Noah rubbed his face like maybe that would erase what he'd just seen. Okay, he muttered, stepping outside. "I'm just gonna need a second." "Noah," Caleb tried, his voice low, calm. But Noah held up a hand. "No, you don't get to talk yet." Caleb shut his mouth. I opened mine again, heart pounding. "I'm sorry," I said. "We didn't plan this. It just happened." Noah exhaled hard and sat down on the porch step, elbows on his knees. He stared at the ground, like it had personally betrayed him. "This is so weird," he said. "Like, so weird." I didn't argue. Because, yeah, it was. "My brother, man," he said, finally looking at me. "You've known him forever. You've crashed on our couch. You've borrowed his hoodies." I almost laughed at that last one, but it didn't feel like the right time. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," I said. "But it wasn't just physical. It's not just some random hookup," he finished for me, "because it kind of feels like a betrayal either way." Ouch. I glanced at Caleb. His jaw was tight, his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie. He looked like he wanted to say something but was holding back. For my sake, maybe. "I care about him," I said quietly. Noah looked at me, eyes narrowing just slightly. "How long?" "Since last night," I admitted. "But I've been thinking about it for longer. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to deal with it." He shook his head. "This is insane. I can't wrap my head around it." "Like, you and Caleb? You think I'm not just as surprised?" I asked. "This wasn't planned. We're just figuring it out." Noah didn't answer. Caleb finally spoke. "I didn't want to go behind your back. But it happened, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I care about him. That's not changing." Noah looked between the 2 of us, lips pressed into a thin line. "I need to think," he muttered. "I need, like, time and a lot of coffee." He stood, ran a hand through his hair, and went back inside without slamming the door. But it felt like a slam anyway. The silence after he left was heavy. Caleb turned to me. "You okay?" I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "That could have gone worse." "Yeah," he said. "Could have gone a hell of a lot worse. But it still might," I added. He nodded. "Probably." Then, after a beat, he said, "Still worth it?" I looked at him. Really looked. At the concern in his eyes. At the softness he only seemed to show when no one else was watching. At the fact that he hadn't once made me feel like this was a mistake. "Yeah," I said. "Still worth it." He smiled, just a little, and reached for my hand again. The rest of the day was tense. Noah avoided us, not in a dramatic, storming out kind of way, but in the kind where he stayed in his room, kept his headphones on, and gave us exactly 0 eye contact when we passed in the hallway. Caleb offered to talk to him again, but I said no. I knew my best friend. He needed space. Time. A full 24 hours and probably a terrible meal to process anything bigger than a video game update, so we gave him that. Caleb and I spent most of the afternoon in the garage. He worked on fixing a bike he'd been trying to restore, and I sat on an upside-down bucket, sipping soda and watching him work. We didn't talk about last night. We didn't talk about Noah. We didn't talk about what came next, but we kept stealing glances, little smiles, fingers brushing when he handed me a tool, the kind of quiet intimacy that doesn't need words. Later that night, I went to the guest room again. This time, we didn't have to sneak. This time, he didn't wait for me to say yes, because I already had. We didn't sleep together. Not again. We didn't need to. We just lay there. His chest against my back, his breath warm at my neck. His hand rested lightly over my stomach, grounding me in a way I hadn't known I needed. We fell asleep like that, and in the morning, I woke up to something I hadn't expected. Noah standing in the doorway. He didn't look mad. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. "Hey," I croaked, sitting up a little. Caleb stirred beside me but didn't move. Noah scratched the back of his neck. "I'm not gonna lie, this still feels super weird." I nodded. "Yeah, it is. But," he continued, "I also know you, and I know him, and if this was just a fling, you'd be sneaking out the window, not curled up like someone's husband." Caleb chuckled low in his throat. I elbowed him gently. Noah sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "Look, I'm not gonna pretend I love it, but I don't want to be the guy who makes this harder for you." "You're not," I said. "I was. Yesterday. You were being human." He met my eyes. "Just don't screw each other up. All right? I don't want to lose either of you." "You won't," Caleb said from behind me, voice groggy but sincere. Noah looked at him, then at me, and finally nodded. "Cool. I'm making pancakes. You guys want some? Get your asses up in 10. Then he walked off, muttering something about domestic bullshit as he disappeared down the hall. I stared at the empty doorway, still processing. Caleb wrapped his arm around my waist and pulled me back down into the sheets. "Told you it'd be okay," he murmured. "You didn't say it'd be pancakes," I said, grinning. "Bonus," he said, kissing the back of my neck. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt completely at ease. We weren't hiding anymore. Things didn't go back to normal. But they settled into something better. Caleb and I didn't make some big announcement. We didn't post it on social media, didn't suddenly start calling each other babe in front of Noah. We just existed together. Sometimes quietly, sometimes wrapped around each other under a shared blanket while watching late-night TV. Sometimes just sitting on opposite ends of the couch, his foot brushing mine without needing to say a word. Noah adjusted. He never asked for details, thank God, but he made his peace with it in his own way. I think he realized what we had wasn't about sneaking around or trying to hurt him. It just was. Real, unavoidable, and something that maybe, if he really thought about it, he saw coming before either of us did. The first time we went out in public, just the two of us, was to grab coffee. No big deal, right? Except Caleb reached across the table halfway through and wiped a little foam off my upper lip with his thumb. No hesitation, no nerves. And the girl at the table next to us smiled like we were just another couple, because we were. It was small moments like that that made it real. The way he started calling me, "Hey, trouble," when I did something dumb. The way I'd lean into his chest after work, soaking in the quiet warmth of him without needing to fill the silence. The way he'd leave notes on the bathroom mirror when he left early. "Don't forget your keys. Also, you're cute." We didn't talk about labels. There wasn't some grand heart-to-heart about what we were. We were us. That was enough. But one night, weeks after that first kiss in the kitchen, I asked him a question I hadn't had the courage to say out loud yet. We were lying in bed. The lights were off. My head was on his chest, his fingers lazily tracing circles along my spine. "Do you ever wonder if this was a mistake?" I asked. He was quiet for a second. Then, "No, not even once." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Not even because I'm, Noah's best friend?" Caleb's chest shook with a soft laugh. "Especially because of that. I always liked watching you two when you were younger. You brought out the good in each other. It's how I knew you were solid." I tilted my head up. "So you were watching me?" He smiled in the dark. "Of course I was. You walked around like a ghost, pretending you weren't watching me too." Busted. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and said, "You're not a mistake. You're the one thing lately that feels like I did right." And just like that, every last bit of fear faded. We weren't supposed to fall for each other. But we did. In between the awkward stares and late-night confessions, somewhere between a kitchen light and a bedroom door, we found something that made all the messy, complicated beginnings worth it. And as weird as it might have been at first, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.